Yes, so thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm going to talk about the group.
Yeah, introduce yourself and the name of the working.
My name is Noah Levy, and the group that I was the head of was dealing with immigration and return of Palestinian refugees policy. Um, I was asked to focus on the implementing aspect, but I do want to start with why is it relevant actually, because yes, in my group, in the research group, that we discussed a lot of the issues of the planning. How can we plan the return of the refugees? What are the sensitivities? Who are the refugees? What do we know about them? We try to gather information and to gather as much research as we could to understand who are the people that we talk about and what are their needs. And we established a model with several courses of return, taking into account both sociological, political, economical, and symbolic and material aspects of the need for return of the Palestinian refugees. And we also taken into account, I'm an attorney in my profession, and we taken into account the aspects of transitional justice theory that is implemented in different countries when the regime is being transferred from one into another, like in this proposal that we talk about today, 2 states, 1 land. But the details. If Dalia said before I talked, she was saying that it seems like a fantasy. So when you talk about the return of Palestinian refugees, that is really a fantasy, right? It's a fantasy that is already kind of half people think that maybe it's too late, maybe it's not going to happen anymore. But we felt that that it's not something that can be, that there's a real problem with solving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict without giving a real deep thought to the question of refugees. Because for the Palestinian side, the refugee problem is considered the core of the Palestinian struggle, of the Palestinian problem. For the Israeli side, the refugee problem is considered as the biggest obstacle, the one point in which we think, okay, if the Palestinian refugees come back to the borders of 48, then we have no future here, we the Jews. And this conflict is one that is not being resolved, even with the leftist groups, even with the anti-Zionists, the most radical ones. No, this seems like the obstacle that cannot be crossed. And it was very important for us to establish a vision in which real acknowledgement of the right of return and real taken like planning and practicalities of return, which is a project that was continued. If I was taught, it was considered, Dan said earlier, or Meron, that I was from Zuchot, so it's a continuation of this project actually, and we wanted to show that both symbolically and practically, return of the refugees to the borders of 48, because they all were immigrated or were uprooted from the borders of 48, from what's considered today Israel and not Palestine, is possible without any further uprooting, which means you don't need, two wrongs don't make a right. And if you want to make right, bring justice to the Palestinian refugees, you don't have to make the Jews into refugees. Now this is a nice slogan. It's a slogan that is being carried out by many people. But we think that both the Palestinian and the Israeli side have not tried or have not succeeded to give it a real vision of how is it possible. And so we came to think of if you want to think of the return of the refugees as something which is actually possible, you need to think of it as in the reality of the society today, and in the reality of the problems in Israel today, in which return of Palestinian refugees cannot be also considered separately from the general problems of immigration and refugees in Israel, also African refugees, asylum seekers, and different non-Jews, which is like because of the demographic problem is the center. So we decided that we wanted to discuss the problem together and offer a policy that would bring justice and put the right of return in the center of the future policy of this state. we've come to understand, to realize that the Palestinian refugees are actually considered several different groups. The biggest one and the most problematic one is the Palestinian refugees that still live in refugee camps. We're talking about millions and millions of people who live in terrible conditions, terrible economic conditions, with no rights whatsoever wherever they live. Or, different countries have different legal statuses, which is also something we had to look into. And we considered them as the primary population that needs to be corrected, like the wrong that was done to them needs to be corrected. So we said, okay, so first we have a material need. Millions of people who live in refugee camps for 60 years and have a material need in a solution inside Israel. So we need to think of housing projects, major housing projects, in one hand. And on the other hand, to think together and plan together whether any solution in the past localities of these refugees is also possible. And for that we need planning committees that will sit with the refugees and try to think with them of which solutions can be found. In the places where the uprooted villages of 48 are still standing empty, then we need to think what is possible, what is actually possible in these areas. Are we talking about rebuilding? We wanted to deal with the problem of when the Palestinians demand the right of return. We felt that many times it's a fantasy, it's a nostalgic fantasy. Let's talk about returning to 48 in space and time. Let's imagine the reestablishment of the Palestinian villages. It was until 48. Not considering the fact that the population of these villages was grown maybe 10 times sometimes. And then even if a nostalgic return was possible, the village cannot contain so many people anymore. And if it will contain them, then the character or the essence of the village will be totally different. So a new process of planning is needed. At the same time, we also want to take into account the fact that the population that lives in Israel today, Jews and Palestinians alike, suffer from a history of injustice done by the Israeli regime, in which lands were given to specific people and not to others, to Jews and not to Arabs, to Ashkenazi Jews and not to Mizrahi Jews. And a lot of injustices were done inside Israel during the years and have caused gaps, have caused homelessness. We have like problem of homelessness in Israel. A lot of people who are waiting for housing solutions. And now when we want to bring millions of Palestinians, if we don't want to cause a new crisis and a new kind of conflict with the original population, we need to also reconsider a way to do it, and with the acknowledgement of the injustices that were done inside Israel. Now, this seems like a very big challenge, right? We want to solve the problem of the Palestinian refugees and the Palestinians the Palestinians inside Israel that were always negated of their lands, and the problem of the Mizrahi Jews. But yeah, we went and talked to representatives of the different groups that are all affected by the return of refugees. If you want to talk of the return of refugees as something that is going to happen in practice with material meaning, then it means that others will also be influenced by it. So we had to talk to all these people and to learn from them. What are the needs, the urgent needs of these communities in order to be able to accept a vision of living together with the Palestinian refugees inside Israel? We've learned that transitional justice theory has dealt with this question in different areas in the world, and the concept that was given to it was like the guarantees of non-return, which means there were injustices done to the Mizrahi population in Israel, which caused a lot of the problems, the social problems that we have in Israel today. And if we want them to be able to accept the Palestinian refugees not as another kind of foreigner that comes to take their share of this land, then we need to start, and at the same time we're doing these planning committees with the Palestinian refugees. We also need to acknowledge the needs of the Mizrahi population right now, and to think of land redistribution inside Israel. Land redistribution that will include the different popularities, the different populations that was actually excluded from the original distribution of lands in Israel. And in this, we also discussed with people who did similar processes inside with the asylum seekers of the Mizrahi Jews and asylum seekers, trying to actually mediate between these populations. We try to learn their lessons and to think of committees that will actually bridge and connect and mediate so that the different subordinated populations will be able to live together and share the land instead of fighting each other. Well, my time is up, so I might continue with the questions, and thank you very much.
Okay.